everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's me, Francis, and Nate, back at it. Seems like it's been a minute since Nate and I have done one of these regular episodes together. I've been doing a lot of interviews, a lot of dad chats, all kinds of stuff. So we gotta catch up. We gotta see what's going on with one another. It's once again beautiful here in St. Louis. The world is falling apart, but at least here in May, climate change hasn't scorched my garlic yet. So thumbs up for that. We're gonna have at least one more bumper crop of garlic before everything catches fire. Nate, how's things on your side of the pond?
It's about the nicest day of this calendar year so far. It's probably about 80 degrees Fahrenheit here. Beautiful ride up this morning. I left a little earlier than normal just to take advantage of how nice it is. Yeah, I have hay fever like nobody's business. I've taken allergy meds and cold meds today, and I'm still not really feeling it. Of course, there's a possibility it's COVID, but I took a COVID test last night just to be sure, and it was negative. So either my exposure to COVID from Friday night when we did a live show in Bristol has not yet kicked in, and I'm not yet positive, or it's just something else, which... the symptoms are different than when I had COVID anyway, so not as much like runny nose, throat dripping stuff, just as much as like, call it sinus pressure and this general feeling of just not being great. So I think it's just hay fever, which does hit pretty hard here. I think anywhere that's temperate, it does, but a lot of people I know are going through the same thing right now where they're like, fuck, I'm sick. Fuck, oh my God. Is it COVID? And it's like, no, it's not. And it seems to be striking people at the same time. Or the tests don't detect this new variant. It could be that too. But other than that, like I said, I'm in a windowless basement right now recording. But it's all good.
As a proper podcaster should be.
Yeah, but I'm going to be recording. Hopefully I'll go home before the sun goes down tonight. So I get a nice little ride in when it's still light out, and it's all good. Sun's setting pretty late now because we are in Northern Europe, and the sun sets late half the year and insanely early the other half of the year.
Yeah, I ended up, I was in Las Vegas for work 2 weeks ago, I guess. And, man, so still came home, no COVID, still the only member of the zoo crew who has managed to not catch the COVID so far. I also very rarely leave my house, so that helps out. But, I went and I think so my wife and child went out of town as well because they didn't want to be here to deal with the fucking menagerie of animals that we have. So it's just like they'll go out of town while I'm out of town because we're getting a fence built in the back and it's still not there yet for the... I have a Great Pyrenees. You know how that fucking goes with those kinds of dogs. So they went out of town and they left the night before I left. So I called up a buddy. I said, hey, wife and kid are out of town. Let's go to a bar. And I'm sure I probably fucking picked up a cold somewhere at that bar that ended up turning into a sinus infection. So I ended up having to go get some antibiotics and stuff. But still, no COVID. Just kind of feeling like I wanted to die for a little bit, but was able to do my job. And I fucking have an emailing job. I can do that while blowing my nose. It's not that hard. So. Thumbs up to being sick and it not being COVID. Just remember, kids, there are still other diseases out there, not just COVID. However, if the people who are testing our wastewater are anybody to be believed, we're apparently shitting out a lot of COVID all around the world. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Who knows anymore, Nate? It's kind of a like what's the thing that's going to eventually just be the thing that takes over? Is it going to be the COVID? Is it going to be the rising fascism? Is it going to be nuclear war, or is it going to be climate change? Maybe it's going to be a little bit of all of them. We'll see. It's fun times all around. Interesting times to be alive, Nate.
Yeah, exactly. I guess this is what I get for being 16 years old and being like, man, it would have been cool to live in like a more crazy time. In October 2000 when I was nearly 16 years old, had gotten my driver's license, and so I guess I got my wish. I wish I'd wished a little harder for something different.
Fucked it up, Nate. You should have, instead of wishing for like interesting times, you should have wished for like $1 million or something.
There's a running joke we have between in our chat for Trash Future and Kill James Bond and 10K Posts and Mood, big mush together group chat that we have about like what happens if you you travel back in time and you want to prevent 9/11, but how do you prevent 9/11 without either getting killed or being arrested? And it's like trying to convince people that this is actually a thing that's going to happen. And that thought had crossed my mind. We've had this running joke about like, oh, it's always 1998 in my head still. And it's like, it's just, what a beautiful time to be alive. It sucks it's only 3 years till 9/11, and I'm aware of this somehow. But I'm still in 1998, so I'm still getting ready to enjoy the summer of '99. You know, get some Lens, Steal My Sunshine playing on the radio. You know, it's all good.
I mean, yeah, 9/11 is going to happen in 3 years, but like this is like the apex of Smashing Pumpkins, you know, and you know that great 90, I mean, just that great like late 90s music that you know was the perfect time for me. Like this is, you know, and then somebody ran airplanes into my into my idyllic lifestyle, but at the time things didn't cost so much. And let's also be honest. We are talking about this as, you know, middle class privileged white people. It was probably a little bit different for other people in 1998.
Sure. I mean, Cynthia and I were talking about this recently, and it was confirmed when I looked it up on Wikipedia because the author or the writer of the show confirmed this. But my hunch when we talked about the show The Shield was that surely this must have been based on the Rampart crash scandal. And I looked it up, and that was the case. And that same sort of thing, Training Day, was the same sort of thing. You know, if you have like, why are they all these movies about corrupt police squads in the LAP that came out right in the early 2000s? It was like because in, you know, I think 99 the story broke that the anti-gang task force in the LAPD was just basically running a big street gang themselves, which is not really any departure from normal police activity, but they were particularly awful.
Right, and is still happening too. Like
look up Rampart crash if you're unfamiliar with this story. It was just a lot of planning drugs, murdering people, you know, planning drugs to force people to be CI, sending them to go get themselves killed, lying on the stand, getting people sent away for life for shit they absolutely didn't do, like just very knowing, fraudulent shit. And a bunch of cops went to prison for it. I think a couple cops committed suicide rather than going to prison. And if you're familiar with the plot of the FX series, The Shield, this would not be a surprise. But yeah, it's based on real stuff. So that was late 90s also. But I was going to say one thing that's really funny to me, and this might not hit super hard unless you are a fan of, if you're close to me and Francis's age, and we're into we'll call it the sort of apex of Pitchfork, like indie music in the early to mid 2000s. Maybe you know this and maybe you don't, but if you were aware of that genre that I'm describing, that sort of general ambiance, you're aware of the band Broken Social Scene. Band from Canada, kind of a sort of indie supergroup, pulled from a lot of different groups, had people in that were like rotating members. I think Emily Haynes from Metric like sung for them on some tracks on their first album or one of their first albums. But something that I didn't know until I was doing a deep dive on that late 90s nostalgia shit is that Brendan Canning, who founded Broken Social Scene, one of the founding members and primary songwriters, was a member of Len and helped write Steal My Sunshine. That's the best way I could describe that. That feels like, fuck. Like, I'm trying to think, that would basically be like if one of the guys from LFO then also was a founding member of The Strokes. Like one of the guys who wrote that song about fucking, what is it, like I like girls who are Abercrombie and Fitch, whatever the fuck the actual song was called. Imagine if he then was like, oh yeah, and me and my buddy Julian Casablancas formed this band called The Strokes. Like it's that level of a departure musically. It's just very funny to learn that.
I would. This is almost like, you know, if you discovered that like Violent J was also a country music had like, you know, just like, oh, also I just do some outlaw country on the side.
I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Dwight Yoakam, the country musician. He was mostly popular in the late 80s, early 90s, but he had a big hit in the late 80s with a song called Streets of Bakersfield. And then he had an album come out in like 93, I think, that had like a bunch of country top 10 hits. But he was like, he's also famous for being an actor. He played the evil, abusive stepdad in Sling Blade, and he played one of like the burglars in the movie Panic Room. But like, he's a very established country music star. Like the guy who plays the evil stepdad who gets killed by Billy Bob Thornton in Sling Blade was one of the biggest country stars in the 90s. But the way he got his start was like, I don't think he ever established himself in Nashville. He basically played like alt country shit in the same kind of bars that like Black Flag would play in Los Angeles in the early 80s. So it's like a very, very weird juxtaposition. But like from what I can tell, people were like, no, this guy's part of our scene. We're down with him. Like, this isn't really a country music town, but like we like this guy. So like weird shit like that can happen, you know, where someone
I know that like country music has a people think of it as this right wing kind of
because it is.
She thinks my right, and like mainstream country, yes, absolutely, but like there is a genre of like outlaw country that is fuck the government, fuck the cops, I'm gonna do what I want. But just rather than the punks who are running around the concrete jungle of the cities, the country kids are just doing it around out in the middle of the country.
Also, let's be perfectly honest here. Country music as a genre, when you go back to classic country, is sort of like the antecedents of what would be like this sort of 60s and 70s country. Like it's all blues music, which is black music. Like black people invented country music. Like that is the truth. It's just that, by the time of Garth Brooks or Chris Ledoux or Brooks and Dunn, Clint Black, all of these people that were what they call the class of '89. Like I think Chris Ledoux was before that, but Garth Brooks, Clint Black, Vince Gill, all these people that like they had their first singles come out in 1989. Like all these people that are now looked at as like classic, extremely classic, almost orthodox country. That was considered pop country compared to stuff that was popular in the 60s and 70s. And like, so it's always been evolving. It's never been this one thing that you can nail down in terms of like Nashville country music, but like it wasn't so white before. And a lot of the sort of Republican, I got a big truck, I vote Republican, that kind of shit. Like that's a recent thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was always pretty white in terms of like what was popular in, let's say, the 90s onward. It was always pretty like, we know better than the city. Like I think about, I can't remember, was it Brooks and Dunn, but the song, I think about Working Man's PhD as another song. Like I think about a lot of this stuff that, it was pretty, I mean, a Confederate Railroad, like some of that shit was pretty like, we love the Old South kind of stuff. But, there also was a time when, I mean, Garth Brooks, like the guy who was like the #1 country star for forever. Like, he wrote a song that was pro-gay rights in like 1992 and had a video that was like pro-gay rights, pro-animal rights, like basically extremely like progressive for country. And CMT literally played it once and they're like, yeah, fuck this, we can't play this anymore. People are gonna get mad. It's called We Shall Be Free. It's a great song. It basically has been like exorcised off the internet because there's no videos for it, and I don't think you can see the video on YouTube. And I don't think Garth Brooks' music is on most popular streaming platforms. But like you said, there were always kind of countercurrents or cross currents in it. And I only know this because my parents basically went on a we hate rock and roll, we hate pop music kick when we moved back from Germany, and the only like music television I was allowed to watch was CMT. So I have like a fucking encyclopedic knowledge of what was on CMT from 1993 till about late 95 when my parents finally just gave up on that shit. I started being able to watch regular music.
They too were just like, no, I'm done with this. You know what threw me off is I had no idea who Chris Christopherson was. I just thought he was Blade's sidekick.
Yeah.
Like I was like, yeah, Chris Christopherson, this guy's cool. I want to see what else this guy's been. Oh, he's like one of the most popular and well-known and well-regarded country music writers and singers of our generation. Okay, but also he plays Whistler really good, and I like him in this. And he was in all 3 Blade. I have no idea why he was just like, yeah, I want to do this fucking goofy ass Blade movie. I'm glad he did because he's fantastic in it, and I wish that there was more of that. But it's I guess we'll just deal with we'll just have his music.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, I mean, there was definitely I want to say Lyle Lovett was in a movie. I know that
Lyle Lovett was in The Fucking New Guy as DJ Quayle's father, who is a guy, and there's not much from that movie that I can remember, but I just remember Lyle Lovett's thing is that he's like a scrapper, but he scraps styrofoam, and his thing is just like, he's like, it's great, you could pick up so much of it because it's so light, and the best part is they pay for it by the pound, and that's like, it's just a stupid fucking joke. But yeah, he's just like a scrapper, and he's got like one of those old beat up pickup trucks and just like a bunch of like styrofoam like takeout plates that have been packaged in the back, and that's just what he does is he scraps styrofoam.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember the movie Maverick with Mel Gibson, but I want to say Clint Black has a cameo in that as like a poker dealer who gets thrown off a boat or some shit. But yeah, like we've gotten on another dad chat style digression here, but ultimately it's really strange to me because I think post Dixie Chicks basically being thrown out the window by the country music industry, there was definitely a turn towards like, no, we support Bush and we support the Iraq War. And I got to be honest with you, when I listen to country music now, which is not voluntarily, but when I'm back home and like, for example, there might not be any other station on the radio if I'm in a car that doesn't, like a rental car that doesn't have a CD player, or a aux jack, fucking, it's terrible, man. I can't stand it.
Yeah, we'll leave it at this, but 9/11 ruined country music. 9/11 ruined a lot of things, and country music is just one of the side casualties that nobody talks about because everybody's just like, no, it's always been like that. Like, no, there was a time when country music was, like, not all insane. There was a time when it wasn't Shockin' Y'all. Like, I think when Shockin' Y'all came out, that was the real, like, okay, country music is over for, like, normal people.
I think because I mean, everyone did their fucking, what was it? Alan Jackson did that "Where Were You Where the World Stopped Turning" song.
Oh God, can Americans be more up our own fucking asses? Like, oh no, a terrorist attack happened to us. Like, where were you when the world stopped? Bitch, this happens. Like, the shit like this happens in countries all over the place.
It's like, Alan Jackson, go back to singing songs about like getting fucking drunk when you were a teenager on the Chattahoochee River. That's actually a good song.
Yeah. That song, that's a bop.
Yeah, so, no, I mean, I would also say, too, that no disrespect to Shania Twain's actual music, but Shania Twain becoming a thing with a sort of, like, pop country production crossing over in a huge way, it did seem to me that a lot of people who were way worse than her at doing pop country songs then also entered into that realm. So, yeah, now it just, when I listen to it, I can't. It's very rare to me that I hear a country song on the radio that I'm even, like, I would want to hear this again, or I'm happy that I'm listening to this now. It's so infrequent. And yeah, so that's that we can put a pin in that one. But very, very strange world, isn't it? When it comes to the ways in which 9/11 just destroyed everyone's brain.
Look, once again, Americans are just, we're very far up our own asses. And it wasn't until this conversation that it's like, oh yeah, another casualty of 9/11 was music. Like, music fucking deflated after that. And that's where we got, look, I'm not going to say that that's where, like, a lot of emo and scene music was really, like, came from. But I remember, like, post 9/11 it being unnecessarily popular for too long.
Yeah, I disagree because Jimmy World's Bleed American was a huge crossover album that drew so much from that genre, which definitely started in the 90s. Even you could even go so far back as to say the 80s, because I mean, like, no, now you fucking triggered this in me. I'm gonna say it. But
I'm just saying
Bleed American came out before 9/11.
I'm just saying that this is a conversation we should have with Joe, because Joe knows way more about scene and emo music than I do. Like, this should be a thing where, like, if we're really going to digress, because I don't know. I was not into the music scene in this time as the two of you were, and Joe has already yelled at me about my opinions on the beginnings of emo and scene. So let's instead of you yelling at me at it again, let's go ahead and talk about.
Actually, we're going to blame it on Sunny Day Real Estate. It was pre 9/11. It was the 1993 World Trade Center bombings created emo. We can just go there.
Emo created 9/11.
Exactly.
Here's the problem. All this music was really popular in Saudi Arabia at the time, and they're just like, he doesn't hate our freedom. He just hates that grunge was going out the door.
So anyway, talking about something else that got destroyed by 9/11, the U.S. military's ability to not be completely fucking insane. You found something. Well, you trolled military.com and you found something.
Well, I saw this being posted around, and it's military.com. The headline for it, it says, quote, unsettling, end quote, Army recruitment video ignites debate over its mysterious intent. And this is a video that was put out by Fort Bragg's 4th Psychological Operations Group Airborne. So it's Fort Bragg, Murder Swamp, PsyOps guys are now
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that 4th Psychological Operations Group Airborne from Fort Bragg is probably the schoolhouse and the recruitment center for PsyOps. That's why it wouldn't just be a single unit doing this. This sounds like it is. They are doing this in order to recruit PsyOps people.
Right. Now, because Nate, you remember being overseas and watching AFIS TV and like how you don't see commercials from the United States. AFIS like creates its own commercials sometimes, right?
Yes. I remember the 3D rendered second lieutenant postmaster officer commercial telling you what you can and can't ship, but it's a rap song called "You Can't Ship This," set to MC Hammer's "You Can't Touch This."
Yes. I remember when I was in Afghanistan, I actually shared an office with a guy who was in one of the commercials that was rotating through AFIS. It was great because it was a no drunk driving one. So his character was like, oh, I'm at the bar and just drinking, and oh, I'm getting ready to leave. And he goes out to his car, and his car, like 2 of the wheels are missing. And he's just like, what? And then he's like, well, I guess I got to call a cab. And like his buddy at the bar is just like hands the bartender a, the wrench to take tires off the, what is that called? Anyway, the lug nut wrench to take the tires off, and he's like, thanks. It's like, don't do drunk driving. And it's terribly acted. It was in the middle of the day, which I thought was great because we just made fun of him for like getting drunk at
hammered day drunk,
3 p.m. at this dusky bar. But there's a lot of the military creates a lot of its own like commercial content, but it's normally kind of shit. Because like the Army doesn't recruit people who like, it recruits people like me, and then they say, hey, here's a vague idea of how to like create a commercial or something. Here's what we're looking for. We can script it out, and you can make something that looks okay. It works for AFIS. It's a funny thing, but obviously they're not hiring actors. They just grab whatever soldiers are around that are willing to, be in this thing, because fuck it, you get to be in civilian clothes all day, and you don't have to do your regular job. So who the fuck wouldn't do that? This, however, this insane video that the PsyOps put out is called Ghosts in the Machine. And I'm gonna do kind of a video that's gonna go along with this. So, if you're listening to us talk about it, you haven't seen it, Nate's gonna have the article linked in the bottom. But this video, like the first time I saw it, I laughed my ass off throughout the entire thing. Because this is obviously something. This is PsyOps's, Marine fighting a lava monster with a sword. This is, these are the stupid recruitment videos that are like, look at all this cool shit that you can do, and you will do none of these things. You will do not a single fucking one of these things that are in this commercial. Because we have cool guys that go do that stuff. Well, actually, I don't know, because there is at one point somebody who's putting on Joker makeup, so maybe you will become the Joker in the Army. In PsyOps, could be. But it does start out with one of my favorite things, my favorite military crutch, the military version of Webster's Dictionary defines, which is putting up quotes from Sun Tzu for some fucking reason, as if any of these things are useful or necessary in today's warfare. But you know what? It makes it sound cool and mysterious. So Nate, I made you watch this for the first time today. What did you think going through this video?
It was extremely high production quality. Reminded me of when the Army Strong videos first came out, when it was clear they had stepped up and they had hired people with a lot of, they had a huge budget. Obviously, like, you can get better looking video nowadays with technology that's cheaper than it was, say, in the mid to late 2000s. And a lot of this video appeared to be stock footage, but it could also have been shot. Knowing it's the U.S. Army's budget, there's like stock footage of Berlin. They could probably have just shot it if they wanted to. I felt like it was very well executed, but a very, very stupid script. And I think the extent to which it really felt kind of ham-fisted was brought forth particularly where there were sort of like the stage performance motif that kept coming back with the guy fully putting on Joker makeup. I think that really, I was just like, oh, you must be joking. And I also feel as though this is an interesting commercial because it will make everyone who thinks the U.S. military and military psychological operations can basically snap their fingers and foment a coup believe that's 100% what they do, whereas it'll also make people who have ever worked with U.S. military psyops be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you guys can't even put out a flyer without fucking figuring out, you guys can't even put out a flyer without failing to use the right Arabic script keyboard and thus having everything be backwards with the letters disconnected. Like, you want to tell me that you fomented Tiananmen Square? Like, come on, man. Just fucking come on.
Yeah.
I also feel like the very nakedly obvious sort of pointing the finger at China and stuff was a little, that made me uncomfortable in the sense that, like, that seems both strategically very, very stupid, but also like it's gonna gin up excitement with the people you really don't want excited about this kind of a thing. Like the real right-wing China freaks, those people, like, it's just weird.
I'm real confused as to why everybody's so afraid of China. Like, are they trying to do some violent shit, or are they just like buying stuff faster than we are and we're stepping on our dicks? I don't really get it.
I think America is in a really weird kind of untenable position as regards China, where on one hand, you have your think tank mega brains rightly for once in their lives pointing out that the price of offshoring everything to China and the price of making China the center of your supply chain is that China's economy is going to continue to grow and that they will become the dominant world economy and the dominant regional power and possibly global power, depending on if they want to do that or not, because of the extent to which, they are poised to pick up the slack where the U.S. cannot or will not, and, various other global organizations cannot or will not, exert influence and pressure. So that's not a value judgment on China. That's just saying that they are in a growing position to do that. So that's position one. That's the think tank mega brain position. And then the other position, which is craven American capitalism, is like, yeah, but people can get paid like 30 cents an hour, and we really want to not pay Americans. And thus you have this situation that exists today where shit's been offshored massively and continues to be so. And I think about it as with China, is that China's also, as its economy develops, as the government continues to, develop internally, refine, improve, etc., as China's middle class grows, as China's upper middle class grows, you see China becoming not just the producer of cheap goods for, Western capitalists, if you will, but also a major regional producer of higher quality stuff, to the point where, I can recall the backwash of this as a little kid, but if you go back and listen to stuff, people talk about stuff from the 60s and 70s, the way people talk about cheap Chinese goods is the way they talked about cheap Japanese goods in the 70s. There's a Clash lyric. He says, "Give me Honda, give me Sony, so cheap and real phony." Now, no one thinks Honda and Sony is low-quality shit now, but in the 70s, people in the West did. Similarly, I remember Mad Magazine, in the Mad Compendium of the 70s, there was this joke about, like, extremely narrow or extremely thin books, and it was like, liberals who have been mugged and are still liberals, well, that kind of like Archie Bunker shit. But also one of them was like a complete list of well-made and long-lasting and effective Japanese products. Now, nobody would say that now at all, but in the 70s, that's what they said about Japanese stuff. And
that reminds me of a standout line in, I think, Back to the Future Part 3, where 1955 Doc is looking at the components on the time machine from 1985, and he picks something up and he's like, well, no wonder it burnt out. It says made in Japan. And Marty's like, what are you talking about, Doc? All the best stuff's made in Japan. And he's just like, unbelievable.
The damn Japanese, they make cars that don't break. Similarly, Korean stuff. I mean, the way people talked about Korean cars in America in the 90s, I can recall this, that, they were cheap pieces of garbage. Koreans don't know how to make cars, etc. But now, like, everywhere I go, I see Kias, for example. Kia's got probably one of the most popular electric SUVs out there right now, and also British people love SUVs, so I see electric SUVs. It's always that same Kia everywhere. So, like, I think China is developing, and it's going to be a regional competitor for more developed, or more like further down the road of being developed East Asian economies. But also, the United States is ripping itself apart, fucking doing, going out of its way to prove the point that the government can do nothing by doing nothing. And the Democrats are basically the ratchet that prevents any movement to the left, and the Republicans keep torquing it to the right. That's a cliche, I know. I ripped that off Twitter, believe me, I know that. But it is happening. And meanwhile, China continues to develop. So people lose their minds about it. But this is also mostly America's doing solely in terms of America's position as regards China. Britain is the same way. The British politicians talk incredibly condescendingly about China. But the thing about it is that Britain's economy was bigger than China's in 2000. It is not anymore. It is emphatically not anymore. But British politicians basically still think it's the 90s. That's the weird 90s, early 2000s nostalgia is a huge thing in terms of like their policy prescriptions. Everything about them is sort of, oh, the financial crisis never happened. Let's just rule the way that we did we cut everything, privatize everything. That's the way we got to go. And people are just ignoring the fact that, yeah, China's economy has continued to grow massively every year. And, their economy has continued to mature. Their export economy has matured significantly. And, you're in a position now where they're not yet the world leader, the world economic titan, but they're going to be. That's the thing. At this rate, they're going to be. And, America still won't have healthcare or trains that work outside of the, Boston to Washington, D.C. corridor.
But holy shit, man, guns are cheap. Actually, they're getting expensive again.
The thing that made me that I pointed out too is that, like, yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to say like, oh, everything's perfect in China. I mean, like, lots of people can tell you all sorts of problems in China.
Sure. We are not any world government is good or bad kind of thing here. It is very much like America. Like, it seems like China, at least everybody's on the same page of what they're doing, and America is just like trying to figure out, like, do we want to be fascist? Do we not want to be fascist? Nobody seems to be able to figure it out. I mean, I know which way I'm voting. There's
plenty of dissent in China. There's plenty of arguments. There's actually a significant argument of younger people who are trying to sort of push for more orthodox Marxist or Maoist governance, and they're basically being persecuted by the Chinese government also. So, like, believe me, there's all sorts of things, and it would be foolish to say, okay, one system's perfect, one system is always horrendous. That being said, China didn't invade Iraq and Afghanistan and dump tens of trillions of dollars into a morass that only just murdered people and wounded people and dumped more or less laundered government money through oil companies and defense contractors. China's built immense amounts of high-speed rail across the country, whereas America can't and won't, mostly because I mean, on one hand, the argument is obviously in China, like, there's ultra eminent domain from the government. They can build whatever they want. But also there's a desire to have it. You can't really get far in the Chinese system being the sort of like guy who files the lawsuit for bullshit reasons to jam stuff up. That doesn't exist. So we can argue all day whether that's good or bad. I mean, if you like trains, it's good, but also there's
that is Twitter's like main love is trains.
Well, I mean, you have this shit in Britain too, where they're building high-speed rail, but like basically the Green Party is trying to derail it because they're like, well, a couple of trees are going to get cut down, and that's awful. We can't do that. And it's like, guys, you do realize that Britain hasn't had any new rail capacity built since the 50s, and if you don't do this, like, the train network we have is jammed massive to capacity, and that's one of the reasons why it's so expensive. The other reason is it's privatized, and if they don't build more trains, we can't take trains, so we drive cars, which burns fossil fuels, or we fly, which also burns a fuckload of fossil fuels. And the reason why they don't have this problem in other countries is because they built stuff. So we might want to build some things, but British people are, yeah. There's a reason America is the way it is because it was founded by the British. So we'll put a pin in that one.
Yeah, for all of our celebrating getting away from English rule, we sure did take a lot of we basically kind of Control-C, Control-V'd the entire country.
I mean, I would say also that the whole Anglosphere is like this. There isn't really a normal English-speaking country, save maybe New Zealand. But a lot of that, I think, is, I mean, my very, very cursory understanding of New Zealand politics is that it's not a big country. It's never been a particularly big country. It's always had a very small population. A lot of how they act is sort of in response to feeling ignored by Britain and not wanting to be like Australia. And I think that if New Zealand got bigger in terms of population and influence, it might, because you've got the same culture war problems. You've got the same psychotic stuff that happens anywhere else. It's just not as big and loud as Australia or America. You could also make the argument that Ireland is a normal Anglophone country, but Ireland I feel as though that would be an oversimplification, and also would completely ignore the fact that like there's a huge housing crisis in Ireland. It's very hard to have a normal life there if you don't have money. So that's driving a lot of people to leave Ireland, and it's just not. You can't point at them and be like, oh yeah, you know what we need to be? We need to be more like Ireland, because like I think any Irish person who hears that would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? So yeah, I don't think there's a normal English speaking country, quite frankly. I think that there. I mean, even Canada, which loves to sell itself as normal America, Canada's housing crisis is such a monumental time bomb that when it does finally fall apart, it's going to be, I think, among the worst of those sorts of things that has ever happened. Genuinely, I think it'll be worse than what happened in Japan when the property bubble collapsed in, I think, the early 90s, like 1990s.
Well, I saw adjustable rate mortgages are becoming chic again in America, which I believe last time that was around 2006, 2007.
They're all the thing here, man. It's very hard to get a not adjustable rate mortgage in this country. It's also not as, like, especially on a first-time mortgage, from my experience from people I know who've been doing it, it's pretty hard to get long-term fixed-rate mortgage. Like, most banks will offer you, I mean, you can look for it, but like the competitive products they try to sell you on are mostly going to be 3 or 5 year mortgages. And not like you pay it back in that full term, but you have to remortgage. So
right.
like
you just have to keep remortgaging and remortgage, so you'll never pay it off.
Well, it's less so that, and more so that like you can't just lock in a payment and keep that payment for the full term of the loan. Yeah, British people are comfortable with. There are like consumer loans, or there were at least consumer loans in this country that had like 5-digit interest rates. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but like it wasn't uncommon to see like, oh, a payday loan with like a 900% interest rate. That genuinely was a thing. And that doesn't raise alarm bells the way it does in America. And also, they're really into adjustable rate mortgages here. So yeah, I mean, like, who knows what's going to happen? Britain's housing crisis is the only reason why it's not as bad as Canada's is because my impression is that Canadian property speculation has encompassed the entirety of the Canadian real estate market, whereas in Britain, it's money laundering and it's mostly luxury housing. That's driven up the cost, and the fact that, like, you know, the areas that people want to live in this country are pretty compact. Like, there's a housing shortage overall. There's upward pressure on prices because they've been massively like reducing the stock of available public housing. But my impression of Canada is that like any kind of housing, whether it's like a fucking parking lot or whether it's like a luxury house, has been hit really hard by speculation. So. Yeah, it sucks. There's no normal English speaking countries. Maybe just speaking the English language means you're not normal.
Have you ever seen the movie Pontypool?
I've not. What's it about?
It posits the idea that language can be a virus. And
isn't Pontypool a city in Wales?
Canada, I want to say. It's a Canadian horror film, but I don't know if there's one in Wales too.
There is, and it's the original one. It was found. It's yeah.
Oh, this is new Pontypool.
Bitch, the idea that you're like, oh yeah, Pontypool, the Canadian town, and you ignore the fact that like Canada was settled like last year, and Wales has been around since like before the English language existed.
Wales, give me a fucking break. What does Wales have? What is Wales given to this fucking world?
Anthony Hopkins.
Anyway, we've gone way off of Ghost in the Machine. The other thing in this video that I really love is the about the 45 to 50 second mark. There's a pan in the woods and a picture of the now I had this in the store for a while. I'm probably have to bring it back, but the Ghost Brigade patch, which is the ghost that's kind of shooting lightning bolts out of its hands. This is the officially known as the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops of the World War II. It is extremely funny to me that they're doing this because the Ghost Army's whole thing was we make inflatable tanks and we have big speakers on trucks to make it sound like there's a bunch of tanks coming at the Germans so that they all run away. And now we've gone from inflatable tanks to Joker makeup for some reason. There's a lot of clowns involved in this.
There's a lot of old-timey cartoons, a lot of fire burning backwards because that's spookier somehow.
Fire sucking in for some reason. It's just very... Again, this really feels like somebody at the Fourth here had way too much time on their hands, way too much production value, and but no budget for like, what if we wrote something coherent that made sense? because none of this makes sense. None of this entire video makes sense. I still, like, if I watch this, I would have no idea what PsyOps does. I still don't. I mean, honestly, I've been in 20 years. I worked with PsyOps. I don't know what they do most of the time. I do have some cool stuff from PsyOps, like Osama bin Laden wanted matchbooks. Like, they got a bunch of those printed up so you could smoke cigarettes, but also know, like, how to turn in Osama bin Laden if you happen to see him outside of, I don't know, the Khyber Pass or something. I also have a wanted poster that has a Hotmail account for you to email if you know where bin Laden is, which I have tried to email. Nobody is monitoring that email anymore. It is gone.
Yeah, sucks, doesn't it? Well, I recall working with PsyOps people, and I mean, a lot of it is just, information support things. Like, they make products. They if I remember correctly, we had some people that did, they helped out with the loudspeakers, they helped out with scanning radio stuff. Like, they would have a team that would do the on location, like, radio intercept stuff. Yeah, they are a branch of special operations. I've got a friend. What's up, dude? You're probably listening. He's a senior officer in PsyOps, and one of the things about his experience that I thought was really funny, he was on track to be a Green Beret, and he got really, like, heat sick during an exercise. And back in those days, like, they didn't give you a chance to retry, which it was complete bullshit would happen to him. They just really fucked him over. But SF was like, yeah, sorry, dude, you literally can't retry. Whereas when I went through, like, maybe 6 months later, if I had failed any event, they would have let me retry it. So it was complete. It was just complete. They decided to be hard asses for some reason at that moment and fucked him. And so he decided to try to do PsyOps, and they were like, yeah, of course, we're happy to have you, but you have to go to PsyOps selection. Now, he had passed SF selection is the thing. He was in the SFQ course, but he had to go to PsyOps. And it's like, yeah, we know you can carry heavy shit. We just want to make sure you can get along with people. And they're like, SF doesn't really test for that. I was just like, that's so fucking funny. Because he's like, yeah, man, if I had failed CA, like, if I had been in the civil affairs Q course and I had failed that, I could have transferred right over to PsyOps and I wouldn't have had to gone to selection. But, like, if you went to SF selection, they're like, no, we kind of want to make sure you could be a normal person.
You want to make sure, yeah. And you know what? That's a good thing to figure out first. If you're trying to go SF and you get pretty far, but then they're like, no, you can't go further for whatever reason, we do still need to make sure that we can put you around other soldiers and you're not going to be completely insane.
I always found it to be a very funny detail. I worked with some PsyOps people in Afghanistan that I thought were good and some who I thought were complete shitbags. I mean, a lot of them were reservists, so it was catch or catch can. Some of them were, like, super professional, and some of them were like
1 weekend a month. And what happened to 1 weekend a month? That's the question for us reservists in those situations. And hey, it's I think PsyOps is no civil affairs is pretty much all reserve troop.
There's plenty of active duty civil affairs, but yeah, I mean, there's far more active duty SF, if I understand correctly, than there are civil affairs or PsyOps. To answer the question, what I recall PsyOps doing in Afghanistan, there was a very, very big split between the ones who were there to do human intelligence, which was basically running sources, interviewing sources, sometimes questioning detainees. As I understand it, this was not a Guantanamo Bay, enhanced interrogation technique stuff. This was like sit in a room with a tape recorder. And that's what they told me. It might be, I wasn't in those interviews. I have no idea. There were those guys, the human ones. They tended to be pretty smart. They sort of understand the world they lived in and what Afghan culture was like. And then there were the guys who made flyers, and that was absolutely catch as catch can. They could be good at their job, or they could be fucking terrible at their job. But they were a force multiplier, to use the term, to an extent. But the human guys, I believe some of them were PsyOps. Some of them were from our brigade, but there were some PsyOps guys who did that. They tended to be pretty sharp. But to be honest with you, I also am hazy on the overall big picture mission, and I'm gonna see my friend who's still in this summer, so I will ask him, like, yeah, what do you do for a living? What do you guys actually do? And if it's not classified, I'm sure he can tell me.
We'll bring him on. Hey, if you're a PsyOps soldier,
no, if we bring him on the show, they're gonna do PsyOps on us. And then all of a sudden, there was going to be ghosts in the machine on our podcast, and, like, people are going to start putting on Joker makeup.
Yeah, don't psyop me, bro. Don't.
Oh, I've been humanted by one of the human guys. It was very funny. Like, he wasn't being a dick, but we worked together a bunch in this training exercise in Alaska, like setting up this training exercise. And then while we were out, because we were in the advanced party, we were doing like proofing all the lanes, running through the rules with the role players. They had hired Dari speakers, Afghan Americans, to come out and basically be like either interpreters or like play people to speak in the language and have to run it through interpreters and stuff. And we were in charge of setting all the stuff and kind of proofing it to make sure it was ready before they ran platoons through it. And while we were out doing this, this guy was in E7. He was, I think he was like a senior NCO for the battalion, but he was not a brigade guy. He was assigned to our battalion, and he got an email from someone he had worked with who was, I think it was like a full colonel, who was like, "We really want you for this team. This going to deploy." And he was just like, "Fuck." He's like, I really would love to do this job, but I know for a fact Brigade's going to shoot it down because they were going to want to keep me. And like, he was good at his job. I think he knew he was good at his job. And I was just like, well, if you want, I could maybe talk to my battalion commander about it. He worked for USASOC for forever, U.S. Army Special Operations Command. So he probably, I mean, I imagine he knows the guy involved, and he'd probably like plead your case. And he's like, "Oh, would you do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, like we've been working for the last week together. Like I'm happy to." And he was like, "All right, sir, let me pull you aside for something." He's like, "On one hand, I really appreciate it, and if you're willing to do that, that would be really great for me. On the other hand, do you see what just happened?" And I was like, "What?" He's like, "If I had said, Captain Bethea, would you be willing to do this? Could you help me?" You might be like, maybe not, if I'd ask you a favor. But actually, you and I have worked together, and so you came up with the idea on your own. Now it's your own idea, and you want to do it more because you want to help me and do me a favor because I've established rapport with you." I was like, "Oh, so you ran me as a source?" He's like, "Yes." And he's like, "This is how I get people to do stuff in theater." And I was like, "Oh, well, fuck me. I got humanted." Yeah. So, a little story there. On how that shit works. And yeah, I mean, that's the whole establishment. Another friend of mine who definitely doesn't listen to this show went on to do some crazy secret squirrel stuff. I don't even know what he does anymore. But he told me one time, he was like, "Nate, we were out drinking in Korea." He's like, "Dude, you got this problem." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "You're better at establishing rapport with people than anyone else I've ever met." I was like, "Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate." He's like, "Here's the problem, dude." He's like, "You want to be friends with people. You want to get to know people. You want to learn new things. You want to be friends with people." He's like, and so like on one hand, I could be like, "Oh, you should go be on some like the Delta Force equivalent of human." He's like, "You'd probably be good at it until you had to go get people killed while they were being sources for you. And that would destroy you because you just like want to be friends with them." He's like, "My recommendation, get the fuck out of the Army." And I was like, "Okay, you're not wrong."
Which is the first time to hear those. Yes, you should get the fuck out of the Army, and continuing that message.
It is,
today.
yeah, and so that's why I decided to do psyops of my own and create a podcast to establish rapport with people who might not be amenable to our politics, and slowly but surely work our way into their brains. So when they have to think about, do I want to re-enlist, or do I want to get an ADSO extension, or do I want to just walk, they're like, "Actually, I'm really good friends with Nate and Francis. I think they would want me to walk." And that's what I'm going to do, slowly eroding your manpower, doing psyops, and I don't even have to put on Joker makeup.
That's right. Instead of putting Fox News on in the chow halls, just put our YouTube channel up and blast this insane stuff to the soldiers all around the world.
Everyone will hate you, and they will definitely not listen.
Nate, speaking of PSYOP, you did a bonus episode.
Cynthia and I had a discussion, we called it Cop Watch, where she made me watch a police procedural, and we talked about how it is full-on Republican/white nationalist/fascist propaganda. She made me watch an episode of Blue Bloods that was troop-related. My wife loves cop shows because she hates cops, but she likes watching the ways in which TV shows like to imagine what white people think cops do. And it's just something she enjoys. She always has. And so we did an episode. We called it Cop Watch, and I'm going to play about 10 minutes of that for you now. And you can subscribe to the Patreon. The link to the episode itself is in the show notes if you want to hear it. And that will be a recurring thing.
Yeah, you'll be doing more of those. Hopefully, I can squeeze my way into some of them because like we've all listened to we've all been surrounded by so many cop TV shows that like no matter everybody has that propaganda that they're just like, ooh, it's bad, but I like it. I like that shit, and I'll watch it all day long.
I don't know if this will make it into the promo, so I just want to put two things in here that I'll just say right now before I play the cut, which is that point number one, the tension between Danny and Jamie in Blue Bloods, if you're familiar with the show, is basically Marine Todd versus the liberal professor, but they're both cops and they both do police brutality. And point number 2, if you've ever watched Criminal Minds, I made the joke on the show, and I believe this with all of my heart, that the reason I hate Criminal Minds is that it's basically if Hideo Kojima did an American cop show. Like, and if you've watched Criminal Minds, you 100% know what I mean. So anyway, please enjoy this promo. That logic is just trumpeted there on out. Like, the Marines they're just too good for society. They couldn't handle the problem.
My favorite was that, you can't be a cop because, if you shoot someone by accident, we don't hide that as collateral damage. And I'm just like, but you do.
Yes, you do. Like, and if there's anyone who knows about hiding bucking dead people as collateral damage, it's someone who's in the Marines who deployed to Iraq.
Well, and the NYPD.
I was going to say, like, a culture of getting away with it.
Remember that time that guy wasn't in Times Square, he went to like shoot his boss, and then like 7 people I think got shot, and they were all shot by the NYPD.
Yeah, so a dude who'd been fired from, I believe, like an advertising job, murdered his boss on the street, and then the NYPD showed up and unloaded at him. They killed him. They also injured 7 other people because all their bullets ricocheted because they suck at shooting.
Yes. Look, one thing I learned growing up around a cop is that cops can't shoot at all. As he once said to me, like, and when it matters, a cop can't hit a barn wall. So
no. Also, let's be perfectly honest. When people are stressed out, pistols are fucking terrible weapons to be firing with, because even if your heart rate is perfectly stable and you're good, if you don't know what you're doing, and typically cops don't, and much like people who don't train with them professionally and use them all the time.
The conversation that came up was there was an incident when I was a kid in Rhode Island where the cop shot at someone in Rhode Island 51 times and didn't hit him a single time. And I remember looking, because I was a kid, I'm just like, how do you not hit something 51 times? Like, law of averages. He just looked at me like, they really had
Cops
no chance
shoot for shit.
that they would need 500 bullets. They probably wouldn't have hit him either.
It's just funny because, I used to train with rifles all the time, but like I only trained bare minimum with pistols in the Army. And I remember my dad had bought some handguns, and we went to a shooting range, and I did pretty well with a 38 with a long barrel, like a revolver. But when I was firing, he had a 40 caliber Glock as well, really small handgun. I struggled to keep it in control in terms of like hitting stuff. And I remember when we pulled the targets back, my dad was like, damn, I guess the safest place in the world to be is whatever you're shooting at.
I'm going to ask your dad about that when we visit this summer.
All right. Well, so I understand the cops who don't practice with guns and don't really care are not good shots. But anyway.
Well, they do make the point in the show that like most cops don't draw their weapon ever. So like they don't really have, and good.
Because the libs won't let them.
Yes.
Because the Black Lives Matter will make up fake charges.
Considering how heavy this season has been about like defund the police, this episode was surprisingly really light about, that stuff. But you can see how the show is just like casually fascist 100% of the time. Like there's 0 moments in the show where you're not, and it's very obvious why this show was, exceedingly popular with Republicans.
So basically, the case where Jamie has to figure out what he needs to do about the cops who got in a fight. It turns out the fight was the woman cop punched the male cop because the male cop coaches their kid's hockey team. They're 9 years old, and her daughter isn't getting game time despite being good because the guy is misogynist. And basically, Jamie goes to his grandfather to get his advice. And his
former police commissioner,
and basically he does like the CBS version of the speech in fucking Boondock Saints about the laws of God are higher than the laws of man, basically telling him like you don't have to obey the law that's written on paper, you have to lead with your heart.
Well, you have to remember this is a very Catholic family, and like there are plenty of instances where like the Catholic Church gets involved in all this stuff too. But and also Jamie is a character who is like the most stickler for the rules.
Yeah, the episodes I've seen with you, other than this one, I remember he's always like the Boy Scout.
Danny Reagan is the one who does whatever it takes, including police brutality, to solve the crime. Jamie is the one, because Jamie also went to Harvard Law but didn't become a lawyer. He became a cop instead, and he will not become a detective. He's just sitting there, being a sergeant. But Jamie is the one who's like the stickler for like every rule. He is Mr. like broken windows policing. If we do all of these things, the absolute letter, we're just going to make society better, and we'll have good community policing, and like neighborhoods will be better, and everything will be good.
So I also felt like it was very interesting because we're talking about this summary, but we're jumping around a little bit, and the scene with the dad being led away, the noble convict, is then butted up by a scene where Maurice, the suspect in the previously the on appeal murder case is being interviewed by the ADA and her detective and his lawyer, and basically he comes across as like full on I'm a killer, kind of like he's portrayed very, very menacingly. Apparently his alibi doesn't check out based on his testimony from 10 years ago, and he basically says, you know, I wasn't the father of the child. I didn't kill this woman, but Marie, or the guy rather, the guy whose case is on appeal, you know, he's into way more shit than any one of you has any idea about, sort of implying that he's like a much more hardened criminal or something.
Yeah, and we never, as you pointed out, we don't really get a resolution of that case, but I just want to read this excerpt from the next episode, which I'm assuming has to do with this case. It might not.
Mm-hmm.
But Erin is stalked by a man who was recently released from prison after serving 12 years. Sounds a lot like this. So she has to enlist Anthony and Danny to investigate her office's role in his sentencing. So, you know, there's always a big also thing on the show in recent years, because if you remember, in New York City, they sort of changed the rules about releasing people.
Yeah. And
this show has absolutely gone hardcore into just pointing out that every time you do this, all you're doing is just creating crime. So there are frequently people on the show who end up getting out of jail or get bail, or they get early release. And it's all this, you know, darn, you know, liberal laws. And they immediately go out and like rob someone's grandma.
Yeah, because literally everyone who's in prison or in jail is there because they need to be. And anyone who gets released is going to be Willie Horton.
Yes.
That's 100%. The show's logic.
Yes. And anytime a cop does anything wrong, you know, Frank investigates, and he absolutely always make sure that they're no longer on the force or properly disciplined 100% of the time. And anytime he turns out to be wrong, he'll just invite them back on the force.
Yeah, so I found it very interesting that you had that juxtaposition of the noble white convict, the evil convict in waiting, who is black, who hasn't been convicted of anything, but you know deep down he's guilty because he's so menacing on screen, and then the deceptive good convict who was wrongfully convicted, but actually you know deep down he's always got to be bad.
He was involved with this. This person was his best friend. You can't have best friends like that and be a good person.
Exactly, and he's also black. So basically, the juxtaposition couldn't be any stronger. Laws are fake if you know in your heart that the law is wrong and you're right. And then finally, at the end, Frank makes the decision, despite having been given carte blanche to hire Captain Phillips, he makes the decision that he's not a good fit for the NYPD because what it takes to be a Marine isn't the right skills for being a cop for some reason. And this is actually true in the sense that lots and lots of cops who are veterans have been fired because they didn't kill enough people. And if you think that I'm making this up, there is genuinely a case that is currently under appeal for a guy suing to get his job back who was a cop in West Virginia after being in the Army in Iraq as an infantryman, I think either an infantryman or an MP. And the reason why he was fired from his job was because he de-escalated a situation, and the cops were like, no, you should have killed that guy. And he's like, yeah, but I had no reason to fear for my life, and I had no reason to draw my weapon, and I knew I could de-escalate it and, you know, disarm this guy with a knife and basically apprehend him safely. And they're like, no, you should have killed him. Their argument was him not doing it created the expectation among civilians that cops don't have to kill you whenever they want to. And so now he made other cops unsafe.
Look, the other thing that makes this interesting is Danny's backstory in the show is supposed to be that he went to Fallujah. You know, he has his Semper Fi tattoo. So apparently, if you're a Reagan, then like being a veteran is a good thing, and you can just commit police brutality because you know. But if you're not Danny Reagan, then being a veteran is a bad thing, and you'll make a bad cop.
Or Frank just didn't hire him because he's black. I mean, there's that too. Like, genuinely, like, otherwise the case falls apart. Like, imagine those in real life, though. Like, you go to city council and they give you approval to hire this, like, media celebrity guy who's done
they'd have him on desk duty or something. Like,
two daring feats to save people.
Bringing ice cream to black children in neighborhoods trying to do photos. They'd hire him. Also, like I said, the reason I brought up the fact that it's his comms person that says it is, like, there's simply no way that cops would listen to the civilian comms person who says that this is a bad idea.
That would be like if I took a corporate comms job at the NYPD and I was like, yo, fuck cops. I mean, that would rule, but I would get murdered. So what I'm trying to say at the end of this episode is, of course, it ends with a family dinner and Tom Selleck wearing a cardigan because that's the show.
Yeah, cardigans and drinking alcohol. That's how every show ends.
And I started screaming that this show is fascist bullshit. I started screaming, this is white supremacist. Cynthia was just laughing, watching me lose my mind.
Well, because like all of these propaganda shows are. I mean, and I think the biggest thing is just, you know, I can watch them because like I don't believe any of the stuff. But if you watch the stuff even passively and you absolutely believe that like cops have the best intentions. Like you're going to watch the stuff and start to believe these things. You know, the original episode I wanted Nate to watch is one that deals very specifically with police brutality and with an incident where, you know, Danny basically has to be suspended because he's accused of, you know, injuring a black teenager. And throughout this show's history, whenever there is a situation where a cop is accused of police brutality, I'd say about 95% of the time in the show that you find that, you know, it wasn't really, you know, the truth and that like this was a bad person, like it didn't go down that way. And the 5% where the cop actually did do something wrong, the other cops knew and they were absolutely like trying to. And Frank always manages to solve this problem if the cop turns out to be one of those bad apples in such a way that, you know, he obviously removes them from the force, but he wants to do so in a way that's the least harmful to that cop's family and all of these things. You know, everything must be...
Oh, you mean like Daniel Panaleo, who was on camera performing a chokehold he was legally barred from using and killed a dude and was not even charged?
Yeah. See, Frank would have at least like, you know, based on Blue Bloods, would have at least fired that person very quietly, you know, let him keep his pension and stuff. And
Meanwhile, in the NYPD, the rule is, from my experience in New York City, there is only one way you are ever charged as a cop in the killing of a suspect who is black or anyone who is black, if you are not white. If you are not white, you might get charged.
But then you'll get no prison time when you're convicted.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, everybody. If you like that, you want to hear more, we have, nearly 6.5 years worth of bonus episodes for you to go back and listen to. So patreon.com/hell of a way to die. You can follow me at Army Strang, follow Nate at In These Deserts, follow the podcast at Hell of a Way. We're all over the place. We got the store, we got all kinds of things. So, and you know, if you've got something you want us to talk about, I know somebody sent me a message about some things that I'm kind of keeping in the bank for next week. But if you got stuff you want us to talk about, if anything like that, just let us know. Reach out one way or another. And for everybody who's listening, thank you for being subscribers. And Nate, we'll talk to you next week.
Yep, have a good one.